So today, Ashley, we're coming together to talk shift. Mm-hmm.
This is new, right?
Mm-hmm. It's something new in essence, but it's kind of the Atma approach of being able to shift mentally, emotionally, physically
Mhm.
into really holistic care.
Right. I think that's initially maybe where it starts, where our health, our wellness journeys start is making that shift, making that,
Mm-hmm.
that jump. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm I'm guessing. I mean, it was for me. I became really unsatisfied with where I was, how I was, what was going on, the quality of my life at that time. And it really was. It was a shift. It was an internal shift um, with the help of other people, external supports, saying there is a different way. There are different options.
Mhm.
And I was not aware of them at the time. Um, but it started. It started as an internal shift, my mind and the awareness around that. So, mm,
I hear that story, that similar story with from a lot of our
yeah.
patients of maybe, you know, going through not being heard and uh, people just not really understanding or not truly listening to what their conditions are, how they're feeling in different medical practices, and then they come here and
Mm-hmm.
they I know they have experienced that shift, and then we kind of help them expand that shift.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's, yeah, it's getting your foot in that door.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so for those people who aren't familiar with Atma or our approach or who we are,
Hmm.
who who are you?
Who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm Ashley. I am the holistic nutritionist here at the Atma Clinic.
Mm-hmm.
Who are you, sir?
Mm. I'm David Lovely. I'm the integrative therapist here at the Atma Clinic.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Functional, integrative,
Mm.
whole, whole,
Whole
whole
person, mind, body,
care.
spirit,
Yeah.
all of it.
Actual health care.
Mm-hmm.
Welcome.
Yes, welcome. So yeah, so this new series that we're kind of co-creating, all of us here at the Atma Clinic, but you and I together, having conversations around talking shift in the quality of life. Right?
Hmm.
So taking a look at what is that? What is quality of life? What have we believed it to be? What do we thought the quality of life? Maybe we've become stuck in, well, this is just the way it is because this is how it's been. And today I think we really want to challenge the that paradigm or that idea or belief of what the quality of life is,
Hmm.
and challenge it in a way that might rub. There might be some friction
A
there.
little friction,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And it's like, how can we how can we stretch how can we
Mm.
stretch those boundaries, or perhaps rethink them, reimagine them,
Yeah.
rediscover something new?
Discover, repurpose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, what does when we talk about when we first dive into quality of life, what does
Mhm.
that mean for you, just in general?
Yeah. I'm gonna take that question in because it's
Yeah, that's a big one.
when it's layered.
Very
And
layered.
I think you you know this about me, and those of you who know me and get sit with me, and I get to share presence with you. Things are always layered. It's not just one dimensional. And so when I think of quality of life, I break that down into four aspects. Quality of life, what is my mental quality of life? What is my physical quality of life? What is my emotional quality of life? And my spiritual quality of life. And all of those components and pieces inform my overall experience of how enjoy words sometimes. How much enjoyment am I receiving and experiencing in life. Like, what is the true quality that I'm living, that I'm receiving, that I'm giving, that I am being?
Where's your potential? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So, in the energy work that I practice in source point therapy, it poses this question, and the question is it's meant to ponder. It's meant to sit in the inquiry of it, just contemplate it. And I can't answer that question for you, right? It's something that we each take into our own experience and say, "Huh, let me just think about that." And the question is, what is the full potential health of the human being?
Mm-hmm.
And when I first heard that question, I paused. Like, I've never been presented with that before. And then so breaking that into those four categories that I described, what is the full potential of our mental health? What is the full potential of our emotional health? What's the full potential of our physical health and
Mm-hmm.
spiritual health? And I think for me, it's an ongoing exploration and a reimagining, a rethinking of what did I think and believe before, and with new information and new experiences, how can that invite new potentials or new possibilities?
Yeah,
Um,
because it's ever changing, really. And I'll be the first to say that I have never sat with these questions. It's,
mm-hmm,
I kind of, and maybe a lot of us do, just live life and just keep going, doing all the things and not thinking about our potential
mm-hmm.
in that light. Um, so this will be a fun
Yeah,
exploration.
yeah. I know it's like
Mm-hmm.
being a student of it, right? I'm just uh, being in the inquiry and studying and just practicing. Like, what is it? What is my potential? It might be different than it was
Yes.
3 days ago today
Yeah.
because information. I mean, experiences and things are constantly being presented. So it's an exciting journey. It can be.
Uh-huh.
Right? Mm-hmm.
So so if we were to break it down,
Mm-hmm.
let's say mental, our mental well-being, how do we even how would we answer that, or how do we sit with that? What do we, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Um
Yeah. So just sitting with
and
that question.
yeah.
Yeah. And can I, before we jump into that,
Mm-hmm.
can I ask you something?
Oh, sure.
What's quality of life for you?
Oh,
What does that
yeah.
mean for you?
Like you said, it's, if maybe you would have asked me earlier this morning, it would have been a completely different answer. But right now, right here,
Mm,
quality of life is forever just expanding and growing and just not being stagnant in that way. Um, quality of life is having peace and clarity
mm,
in the way, I think about myself and the way I am a mother and the way I move in the world.
mm.
Yeah. And then just, yeah, overall happiness
Okay.
and not being bogged down by all
Okay.
the heavy things, or being able to navigate through the heavy things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So quality of life includes specific qualities that you're experiencing,
Mm-hmm.
peace and calm.
Mm-hmm.
So those are components, it sounds like, of what quality of life means to you.
Yeah.
So, mm,
But
I
there's a
love
lot
that.
there's a lot of intention there. I mean,
Okay.
that's, I realize, like, saying those words, I realize, like, it's more or less not really easy. That there's work to be done, or there's practice, um, practice to be had.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like
I love that.
how do we
How do we practice
how do we
quality of
practice
life?
that? How do we practice being peaceful?
Mm.
And yeah.
Mm. So many things are arising as I just listen to you talk. It's like, gosh, yeah, how do we practice peace when someone is coming at us in a way that is challenging?
Mm-hmm.
How do we practice patience? How do we practice, yeah, all of it? It's so it is, it can be challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the reward of that, I mean, the reward of when you're living in your quality of life, or when I'm living in my experience of quality of life, like how much more, I mean, it's not only enjoyable, but how much more authentic and just real am I being when I'm able to live the quality of my life, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually?
Mm-hmm.
And how much does that, gosh, I mean, how much does that just fuel? Like, I think it doesn't take a lot of energy when I'm living authentically, when I'm living my quality of life, when I'm at my best mentally and emotionally and physically. It just seems like life flows.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
They practice, because yeah, that might be momentary, it might be days, it might not. Mhm.
Goals, authenticity, kind of, I feel like, or lately at least, it's kind of a buzzword.
Mm,
Uh, a lot of people are talking about, and a lot of people are shifting out of mindsets and becoming more authentic, or
yeah.
being more intentional in their authenticity. And that's definitely a goal. That's definitely a quality of life.
Hmm.
Um, it's something that we all need.
Yeah.
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 Um, Authenticity, and I want to throw out, because when I think of our friend David here, I think of just some positive self-talk,
Mm,
and the words that we use on a daily basis, whether it's outward or inward.
hmm.
And so practice that word again, just putting in practice just positivity in that regard, switching up our negative words that we throw out, just by default,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Our conditioning that we've kind of adopted and made our own throughout our life experience, that I know
Mm-hmm.
I can be so hard on myself, sometimes still am. And so it's a constant practice of, you use this word, such a beautiful word, compassionate witness.
Mm, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
You want to say more to that?
Compassionate witness means, when I think of compassionate witnessing, especially in a hard, heavy time, I think about, you know, more or less taking yourself out of that really strong, immediate feeling, and that that stress, and that whatever is happening, the response, like whether it be like, you know, igniting past trauma or anything, taking yourself out of that moment, and just sitting with it
Mm,
compassionately, just witnessing the moment, and just being, rather than doing,
okay.
or rather than fixing, is
Mm,
to kind of, think about those layers, really witnessing, like, okay, where am I at? Where am I at emotionally?
mm-hmm.
Um, what's happening mentally, obviously physically.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cultivating that awareness,
Mm-hmm.
really practicing that awareness of what's arising,
Yeah.
and in the midst of the turmoil, the inner turmoil
Yeah.
that comes forward when we're activated.
It becomes a practice in presence, you know? Um,
Mm,
Sitting with that moment and sitting with yourself in that moment. Um, yeah. And we can, I mean, presence is a whole topic.
yeah.
But and I feel like we come back around to it all the time.
Hmm.
But that's a huge thing, that we all need in terms of, finding our potential. Is it always comes back to establishing, just presence,
Yeah.
being in the presence.
Yeah.
Mm,
Hmm. So many good, like, as you're saying, like, yes, there's so many ways, so many avenues we can come into, like, we come back around to these words: awareness, presence, mindfulness, the quality of being that we're experiencing right now. All of these can be um, like touchstones or reminders. Um, and how do we integrate? How do we build those into our daily experience so that we're constantly practicing and remembering?
mhm.
It's yeah, yeah. That's something
Yeah.
we could dive into in May. In upcoming in this series of, like, how do we put this into practice? How do we actually put these concepts, these ideas into our daily practice?
Mhm.
I think it would be good to talk more about that as we carry out this conversation, this series of, like, having a toolkit or something like that.
Yeah. Kind of make
Mm,
like a mental note of like what are all the things that we can pull out of this toolkit, um, for when we're really in the thick of
yeah,
it.
yeah. Let's shift gears a little bit,
Mm.
and if
Shift
you're
on.
yeah, talk shift. Let's talk shift about um, if we were to break these down and talk about the quality of life and what is my potential. What is my potential emotionally? What does that look like? What could that be like if I was reimagining or just looking at my own, like, what is the potential of my emotional well-being?
Mhm.
What would that look like? What would that feel like? What would the experience of that be?
So the first thing that comes to mind when I think about um, my own emotional well-being is really being able to, and I used this word earlier, really being able to navigate through all the feelings,
Okay.
both the good and the bad feelings. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and just finding my footing and being able to ground myself, which is I'm forever trying to practice that. There's there's the idea, so let's talk science a little bit. There's that whole, fight or flight system.
Mm-hmm.
Our We also have to throw in there other responses. So when we're in, um, a stressful environment, a stressful moment, where we may freeze, we may, um, you know, what's the other one? I can't think of it. But if so when I think of my emotional well-being, I think about trying to navigate through that system and finding that peaceful part where
Mm-hmm.
you're connected, as opposed to like, you know, fleeing or you know,
Mm-hmm.
fist up, trying to fight anything, trying to find that connection and compassion, which can be hard.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
can be can be can be really hard. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah. And I think, introducing or bringing into that equation of like not only what is my well-being now, but what's the potential? What's the full
Mm,
potential of my emotional well-being? And having that sense of compassion and grounding, or just that space that you can connect to within.
mhm,
um, I know I've had difficulty looking for that comfort or that grounding externally, and sometimes it works, right? Sometimes it's helpful to distract. Sometimes it's helpful to disengage from the discomfort, right?
absolutely.
And it's also important to reconnect and come back to, when I'm not flooded, when my nervous system is not in fight or flight, but I'm able to kind of come back and really anchor into resilience. And so that I
Mm,
don't have to just look for something outside of myself, but I'm really bringing that back into my own being and saying to myself, like, I am powerful. Like, I'm not powerless to these things. I have the ability, and yes, I may not be there yet, but I can get there, to come back to those. And just as you mentioned before, having this compassionate witness of like, okay, what's arising, and witnessing, like just observing the thoughts that are trying to flood in, that are trying to, bring me down,
mhm,
and saying, no, I'm not going there. That's interrupting my quality of life. Like, that's robbing me of my quality of life in the moment. It's pulling me out of whatever that I was doing, whatever I'm a part of.
mhm,
And sometimes it is taking me out of the element for enjoying the rest of the afternoon or the day or even longer. And so, what is the full potential? When I ask that to myself, like, what is my full potential of emotional health? And I like to just play with this and open the possibilities. I think for me, that's how I open the possibilities. It's like asking those questions. What would it be like to live the full potential of my emotional well-being when faced with stress, when faced with challenges, when faced with anxieties, when faced with depression? What would the full potential of my emotional health be in those scenarios? What would I like it to be? Like, what's possible?
mm, mhm,
And sometimes it might be hard to identify those things because we may not have ever experienced them before, right? We only know what we know, and what we know has been suffering or anxiety or stress, and so to think about the potentials or the possibilities sometimes can be a stretch.
yeah.
And if we're not stretching, if we're not considering those, then where are we going with it? And it may not be the appropriate time to think about that when we're activated, right?
Right.
And I think it's important to welcome that into your own experience. Like, what is the full potential? What could be the full potential of my emotional health?
Mm,
What would my life be like if I navigated anxiety with confidence? Or if I rose in depression with compassion
mhm,
rather than judgment?
yes.
Or if I was faced with stress and I didn't freeze, but I took action?
Tapped
Yeah.
into that resilience.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm,
And like I get I get all the feels. So when I start talking about these things, I just feel my body, like the energy in my body lift, and it's like, yeah, what? That's exciting. It's exciting to think about. Like, what would that look like? What would that be like? To be faced with a challenge, something difficult,
mhm,
connecting with my inner knowing, my inner reason, my compassionate witness, all of those pieces within, and saying, I'm capable. And just breathing through, and like, yeah. I don't know.
mhm.
It's exciting to think about that for me.
Yeah, yeah. Things that I just, like I said before, I've never sat with, and I don't, and maybe that's where things can cause that friction, like we talked about, because it's a little unknown.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't, I'm not sure yet.
Mm-hmm.
I like trying to throw the word yet in as much as possible. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not sure yet of uh what my potential can be,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and is that going to is my potential something that's going to provoke change and just uncertainty. And uh, yeah, but I like how you said, maybe it's not something we're trying to think about in the during the scary times,
Mm-hmm.
during when it's dark and difficult, but having these conversations like right now, having these moments where we are in our down gear, we
Mm-hmm.
are more regulated and open to these these thoughts and to these contemplations.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I mean, the more we kind of shift, the more we talk shift, we build upon that idea of what our potential can be.
Yeah.
And so it becomes easier when we are in the dark times to just tap in, and be able
Mm-hmm.
to recognize, like you said, like, I am resilient. I can do this. I have done this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm really grateful for these conversations,
Yeah.
because it really helps with that practice.
Yeah. And in inviting that, like, what would it look like, or what would it be like if in gatherings, in social gatherings, or in settings where we just, invited these questions in rather than, and nothing, not against or to take anything away from
Mm-mm.
anything. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, what if we introduced this and we just had collectively ask people, what's possible for you? Just sit with that. You know?
Mm-hmm.
What's the potential? What is your potential for mental, emotional, or spiritual or physical well-being? How do you define quality of life? I feel like when we have these conversations, it's like we're putting this information into the field, excuse me, and then it's like it builds upon,
Oh yeah.
you know, these ideas, or excuse me, the potentials build because you're engaged in it, I'm engaged in it, and we're thinking about things with a greater mind,
Mm-hmm.
and we're open to, like, what information's showing up when we have these conversations.
That one is really beautiful. And what a thought and what a world. Yeah, instead of gathering with our friends, our loved ones, our buddies, and not defaulting to topics, to conversation about so and so,
Mm.
or
Such and such.
such and such.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, um, yeah.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I lost my second one, but I think I think as we, you know, my thoughts float
It's
away.
okay.
I
It's okay. They'll come back to you.
they'll come back. They're
Mm-hmm.
important. They'll arise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Mm-hmm.
I love that idea. And we, it's easy to say that we kind of want we're trying to create this expansion when we're talking that shift.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking shift to each other. We want that to we're trying to create that. We're trying to expand to everyone listening. That let's shift our culture, our social culture.
Yeah.
Um,
Our emotional culture, our
mhm,
mental culture, like,
mhm.
yeah. I mean, it.
Because that openness, like you're talking about, that just that you know personal and connectiveness, contemplation of what we are able to do, where we're able to be, in terms of our potential, is really contagious. And it in itself has its own, how do I say, I'm just going to say it, vibration
Yeah.
that is strong.
Yeah.
And I if we're all vibrating on that level of, you know, like working on ourselves, we're really living up to what we can be. I mean, we would all be unstoppable.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, just much more compassionate, um,
Mm-hmm.
better humans.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to ourselves and to each other.
Yeah. Mm,
Mm-hmm.
thinking maybe it's what our world needs, especially now.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm,
Hmm. Mm-hmm. All of this in the quality of our emotional life. Right?
yeah.
All of
Yeah.
these, it just the things that arise. It's so beautiful.
Hmm.
Oh, yeah. Now, go ahead.
Oh,
No, you had it.
I was I was gonna jump into the next layer.
Okay, which is what we might both be
I know.
pulling
I
from the
think,
same stream of
and these
consciousness.
are all kind of just, it's just like a beautiful cloud that we're kind of swimming
Mm-hmm.
in. So it's a lot of overlapping. But I was going to jump into
Okay.
spiritual, um, our spiritual well-being, and where's our potential
Mm.
in that vein. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I'm gonna start
Yeah.
by just personally thinking about when I think of spiritually, my spiritual self and my spiritual wellness. One of the many things I think of is this idea of growing.
Mm-hmm.
Am I growing, and am I open to growth? Do I have a growth mindset?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and another idea is, am I am I connecting? Am I connecting to, well, one, myself? Am I connecting to the people I care about? Am I connecting to the larger elements, any higher powers? All of it. And how am I showing and practicing these devotions?
Mm.
Those are things that kind of pop up for me when I think about really really dissecting my spiritual health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And I honestly don't even know what my potential is for my spiritual well
Sure.
being. I have to, yeah, really meditate on that one.
Sure. I mean, yeah. How much time have we collectively? How much time have we given to that? Just to think about, like, what is my potential, and what does that mean to me? What does the quality of my spiritual life mean to me? Because it's going to be different for every person,
Yeah.
which is something to be celebrated and recognized. Like, it doesn't all have to look the same.
Mm-hmm.
And I joke and I kid in a way, not taking away from anything, but in saying there really is only one way, and it's your way. Whatever that path is that is valuable and meaningful and important to you, that's the way for you. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, spiritually, like, what is the potential, or what is the quality of me spiritually? It's qualities, it's living qualities. Am I practicing compassion for myself, or am I practicing judgment? Those have very different vibrations,
Mm-hmm.
internally and externally. And so if I'm living spiritually fit, then I'm practicing compassion and kindness and love. I'm moving further away from judgment and criticism and greed and selfishness, right? And so really trying to embody those qualities. To me, that's being spiritually fit. Can I show up in a place of love when I am being ostracized or lambasted or criticized or judged? Like, and it comes back to that piece of emotional for me as well, the quality of emotional. Like, can I hold to my own truth of, even though you may be saying harsh things towards me or about me, can I hold a compassionate witness for myself and say, no matter what, I love and accept myself, even though you might not? Uh, to me, that is spiritual strength. And yeah. And so what's the full potential of that for me? Like I to be fully honest, like I haven't given myself a lot of time to really think and contemplate. Like what does that really mean to me? To be, what's the full potential of my spiritual health? But I love that. I love the invitation. And I love your response too. I just really appreciate the opportunity, the openness, and just the space, right, to explore. Mm, yeah.
I love that. I love
Mm,
being students in this space
mm-hmm.
with you and having, yeah,
Mm.
it's, yeah.
Another one just dropped in. Like
uh,
practicing forgiveness.
that's a big one.
Like
Yeah.
sometimes moment to moment, like day to day, like just practicing, like forgiving myself for maybe something I said towards someone or something I did, forgiving somebody else for something they may have said, but just not living with bitterness or anger or
Yeah.
resentment. I know the toll that that has taken on me in my past.
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
the big blockage
Yeah.
that creates.
Mm-hmm.
And taking moments, being intentional with help clearing those things by just really constantly being forgiving. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the quality, the potential of our quality of life can be so so huge when we clear those
Yeah.
blockages.
Yeah.
Yeah, forgiving's a big one.
Mm.
That's
Mm. Yeah.
uh,
Something
ooh,
that's, go ahead, I'm sorry.
no, I'm
Yeah.
just
So
reacting to it.
something that is, it's fascinating to me in my world and in my work is the subtle bodies, the subtle,
Mhm.
our mental body, our mind, our thoughts, feelings, or our thoughts and attitudes and beliefs about self and the world, and then our emotional body and just how we feel about self, others, the world.
Mhm.
And you can't really touch that like you can this cup, or you can like a physical injury. But nonetheless, the heaviness that the mental body carries or the emotional body carries when there's anger or depression or resentment or judgment, like those carry so much weight on our energy. They're a big drain on our subtle bodies. And how much awareness do we have around that? We think, gosh, I'm feeling so heavy and so, but how often do we consider, like, what's the quality of my thoughts?
Mhm.
How am I thinking about myself and about others in the world? And could that be a contributor of why I feel so heavy? How do
Yeah.
I feel about things? And could that be a contributor of why I feel so heavy? And so the practice of forgiveness or compassion or kindness or understanding or tolerance,
Mhm.
how that can free yourself rather than bind you and tie you to more and more suffering.
And thus comes that shift out of that, what becomes a dark cycle,
Mm-hmm.
because the more we create those blockages within ourselves, and between people we love, we just default to
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
Some,
big.
something that I'm just gonna throw it out there, and
Yeah.
we'll see. Yeah, coming into the acknowledgement and the acceptance or the realization that I have created that in my own experience through how I think and feel about things. And so taking ownership of that
Mm.
and withdrawing blame, like, you make me so angry.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's giving a lot of power away.
That, yeah.
I become angry when I experience you doing this. Owning our stuff, because then we can, it's easier for us to take accountability and clear that. But if I'm constantly projecting blame, or it's somebody else or something else's fault or reasoning, I'm just tied to that. I'm leaking my energy into that. And then it's a feedback loop that's giving me more and more suffering.
Mm-hmm.
When I could take the reins back and say, oh, I'm responsible with that. I am a part of that. And I take responsibility, and I forgive you for your part, and I sit and I'm forgiving. I'm trying. I'm willing. I'm open to forgiving myself. Sometimes it's, you know, we're not ready to fully forgive,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's a different of one layer out is like, am I open to forgiving?
Mm-hmm.
Am I willing to forgive? And start there. And I'm also willing to forgive myself for not yet being ready to forgive.
Right.
And so, yeah, maybe that's a tangent.
Add that to the toolkit.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
that's a good tangent.
But that's in the realm of, you know, the work that I invite with people is
Mm-hmm.
claim, take accountability, take responsibility for your part,
Mm-hmm.
and then work towards forgiving what's out there. And sometimes that's a tall order. I know it's been for me. I'm not saying it's easy.
No, not at all.
No. And when I do that work, how clear I feel, and the quality of my life, how that elevates.
Mm.
Mm. Yeah.
Projection is just so easy.
It is.
It is.
And it's subtle.
It's very subtle. The power of our words and how, we make that shift between like you you make me angrier. You doing that creates this feeling in me, this emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and shifting that to, making that claim.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
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 Mm.
Power of how we talk to ourselves, and establishing that dialogue with ourselves,
Yeah.
making yeah being aware of that.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah, awareness is
Mm.
such a powerful tool. And what comes up when you say that is like becoming aware of the stories that I tell myself when faced with situations.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what do I immediately go into narrative wise or thought wise about you doing X, Y, and Z? And, you know, I can run with 30 different.
Oh geez. Yeah.
It's like, whoa, 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 rein it in, rein it in, rein it in. That's, yeah, that's a, yeah, that's another practice, a toolkit
That's
practice.
a that's a
You know,
that's a big one.
like
It's a huge tool.
stopping the narrative before it even starts. Like, don't
Mm-hmm.
go there.
Mm-hmm.
And
Uh,
that's part of, I mean, I guess it could be seen, or I can lump that into the quality of our mental well-being. What's the potential of our mental well-being?
mm-hmm.
What's possible there?
I
Hmm.
think that's a huge overlapping
Yeah.
um, part of the toolkit is, and we might have said this in the previous video or just in passing in the hallway, is that awareness is one of the biggest pieces of that puzzle of initiating that shift and establishing our own wellness, our own quality of life, and it starts with an awareness.
Yeah.
And daily,
Yeah.
um, every moment, just finding finding yourself, being comfortable with yourself, and being aware of everything you.
Hmm.
Something that a lot of people, and I'll say myself, at times for sure, just hiding from that,
Hmm.
hiding from myself, or
Sure.
yeah, kind of just living comfortably in those feedback loops. Just
Yeah. Exercising the shadow.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
Mm.
Yeah. I think I think for me the uh, the quality of mental well-being when I reflect on my journey thus far of being a student to life,
Mm.
the mental piece was most challenging for me to become aware of how I was talking to myself, and what I was thinking about self and others in the world, and practicing awareness around my mental body, my mind. Because for so long I just lived in a default loop.
Yeah.
Felt helpless. I felt like I didn't know, I didn't have the ability to shift my thinking, because I just was so ingrained and so rooted in what I thought, um, and so that can be challenging, and it's it is possible. I mean, when we think about what's the potential for our mental well-being, is it possible for you to take the reins of your mind,
Right.
to control what you're thinking, to have agency over what it is that I'm allowing to come through my mind? And when my mind starts going in loops or ruminating, do I feel helpless that I just get stuck and spin?
Mm-hmm.
Or do I feel empowered that with awareness I can witness that and say, I'm going to stop that
Yeah. Step out.
piece by piece? I'm
Mm-hmm.
just going to start pulling that back and becoming aware that when I go into store, it's like, whoa, rein it in. So, what is possible? And I think I would like to invite that question into everybody's field of awareness. What's possible for your mental well being? What's possible for your mind?
Mm-hmm. Mental health is a
Mm,
something we're forever talking about, and I
mm-hmm.
love one day you had mentioned that let's look at it in a different light as wellness, our mental wellness,
Yeah.
um, and yeah, that is. I mean, these all can be challenges, or better yet, just opportunities
Mm-hmm.
of um, yeah, really exploring. Hmm, I know one thing, and maybe this is a toolkit, uh, something to throw into that in that toolbox is uh, when I'm thinking about when I think about my own mental wellness, because I'm always trying to think of like, okay, well, how to achieve it, how to achieve, what that clarity, or being able to take myself out and um, dissecting the situation. It kind of comes back to that P word. It comes back to presence
Mm,
and um, trying to always put that into practice. Um, yeah, yeah.
mm, mm-hmm.
My thought ran away from me, but yeah.
That's okay.
um,
Mm,
yeah,
yeah. Mm,
yeah. When you think about, I don't know, how do you stop, the ruminating? Um, how do you pull yourself
mm-hmm.
away
Mm-hmm.
to look at the bigger, the bigger picture, and how do you
Mm-hmm.
become witness?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think that there's been a series of things along the way that's helped me piece that together. But at my core, I know I'm not my thoughts.
Mm,
I'm not what I'm thinking.
mhm,
I'm not what I'm feeling. And so I can begin to detach or disentangle from that and not let that continue to spin and ruminate. And having that awareness that I'm not my thoughts, like these things are arising, these thoughts are arising, these feelings are arising, and I'm experiencing them. Like I can now take control of that, and I've practiced that. Not always am I successful. I mean, I still spin. I'm not trying to say I'm perfect or have mastered this in any way, shape, or form. It's an ongoing practice, but having that realization and that understanding, it's helped me along the way. And then mindfulness. It's really observing and witnessing and practicing that. It's like watching what, like a movie, watching what thoughts come through and come past the screen. It's like, well, that's interesting. And then also knowing like there's this part in your mind right now that is repeating everything that I'm saying. You're following along perfectly with everything that's I'm saying. And so we have this ability to capture that. And now what do I want to think? And so practicing that, like this voice that's inside my head, how can I use that? There's a beautiful saying that the mind is a terrible master, but a wonderful servant.
I love that.
You know, and how can we get the mind to work for us? Huh? You know, and so it's exploring like what's possible? Can I? Do I feel like I can control my mind? And I'm not trying to say that in a way of like controlling, but like I have agency over what I think and feel or what I allow to come through. Um, yeah. And like even as I say these things, I'm aware of like things arising in my own mind of there's resistance there.
Yeah.
Right? There's this part of me that's like, should you say that? Are you saying what are you saying? You know, and so it's fascinating to just watch with a compassionate witness. And what arises? And also I notice constriction in my chest.
You feel it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
I think paying attention to that kind of neuroception, paying attention to um, those cues from your body,
Mm-hmm.
because often, sometimes we can, when we're not aware, just see those constrictions, and those are our actual biological cues. It's just like that's just
Mm-hmm.
how I am. That's
Mm.
my foundation. It's my anxiety.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, bringing those into light,
Mm-hmm.
being aware of those.
Yeah, I also there's a just being really transparent. If I'm gonna lean
Please
into it,
do.
like there's this vulnerability that I'm experiencing right now, of leaning into these potentials and possibilities, and maybe they're being pushed back, or what are people gonna think, or what are they gonna say, or are they gonna challenge that, you know? And so I'm aware of this narrative that tries to show up. I mean, it's there, and I'm choosing not to entertain it. I'm acknowledging that it's there. I'm not trying to shut it out. It's active, and I used to feed that and shut down. But if I'm living authentically, like this is really truly what I think and feel. Like we have the ability, we have the power to be able to take charge of our lives, take charge of our health, take charge of our mind, take charge of our emotions. We have this beautiful ability to feel how we want to feel. Yes, outside things can have an influence on us, but at the deepest parts of me, I'm in control of what I think, say, feel, and do. And if I'm coming from that place and something upsets me, I have the choice to say, I can see that, and I'm going to choose to feel neutral here. I'm not going to let that come in and take over emotionally and then mentally and then create a disruption in the quality of my life. But I'm going to practice patience and compassion, self regulation, breathing. And what do I want to do with this information that's being presented to me? How do I choose to show up? It's a work in progress.
It is. I know I know we appreciate that openness. Um, it's it's contagious.
Mm-hmm.
It's as we kind of expand out to beyond us, to people listening, inviting, just putting that invitation out there
Mm-hmm.
to lean into those feelings,
Mm-hmm.
lean into, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
um, and tap into that awareness. Yeah, so thank you.
Yeah. I'm just reminded someone who was beautiful and instrumental in part of my path, Brene Brown.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she talked about the shame gremlins thrive in silence. And so bringing that stuff into the light helps it to, it can't thrive anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can think about that in all aspects of our journey and our healing. Like if we're in a place that is practicing compassion, like we can bring these parts of ourselves forward to be witnessed so that we can shift and change how we see and think and feel about ourselves and others and help healing happen. I'm so grateful for all the people along my journey, all the teachers, everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yourself included.
Mm,
Yeah, you're your
yeah.
own teacher as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm,
Yeah, you mentioned healing, and I want to, throw out there that this space, um, and this way of, at the Atma clinic is, um, we're really big on making these shifts, and it is tremendously healing. And
mm-hmm.
I know a lot of our patients walk away with, um, just feeling that, and healing in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So this this talk of shifting, um, is is a component of our healing journeys,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm, yeah.
Thank
I'm
you.
yes, yeah, thank you. I'm excited for this series to
Mm-hmm.
continue to unfold.
Yeah.
And perhaps the next time we touch base, yeah, we really lean into that toolkit. Like how do we bring some of the pieces that we've talked about today into a practice, or how do we actualize them? How do we
Mm-hmm.
embody them?
Mm-hmm. Make them accessible,
Yeah.
things that we can just bloop, pull
Mm-hmm.
right out,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, on a day to day. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm. Mm.
absolutely. And I invite anyone and everyone listening,
Mm-hmm.
if you know, feel free to comment if there are things questions in regards to
Mm-hmm.
quality of life, or things you think that we should touch on, or um, specific situations that require specific tools that we can
Yeah.
explore.
Yeah.
Please do,
I like that.
be a part of the conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Engage. Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm. Anything else?
No, this has been healing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's been illuminating.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
As
As always.
always.
That's so great. Oh, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.